You ask why people hate you the most when you are doing nothing wrong. And I tell you, this is the mystery of the soul's light casting its shadow in the unconscious of others. Hatred that arises without cause is rarely about you. It is an echo of something much deeper, something that lives in the collective shadow. When you live innocently, when your presence carries no aggression, when you embody authenticity, you awaken in others the parts of themselves they have long buried. And the soul that cannot yet look upon its own hidden darkness projects that darkness outward. It sees in you what it cannot bear to see in itself. Hatred then becomes the distorted mirror of admiration, fear, envy, and repressed longing. This is why the innocent are often persecuted, why the dreamer becomes the scapegoat, why the prophet is despised in his own town. I have long observed that what is unconscious seeks expression. It does not vanish simply because we silence it. When a person represses his anger, his envy, his lust, his resentment, those energies gather below the threshold of awareness. They ferment in the hidden chambers of the psyche until they become unbearable. Then they seek a target, and the target is usually someone close, someone harmless, someone who carries a quality that reminds them of what they have denied in themselves. Thus, you may do nothing wrong and still find yourself hated because your very being has become the canvas for another's disowned shadow. To understand this, you must learn to read hate not as a rational judgment, but as a symbolic message. Consider the dream. In dreams, the figures that attack us often represent parts of our own unconscious. The pursuer, the monster, the shadowy figure, they're not strangers. They are fragments of the self. Hatred in waking life follows the same law. The one who hates you is dreaming while awake, and you have become a dream figure upon which they cast their own unacknowledged impulses. To the degree that they cannot accept their own shadow, they must despise you, for you have become its living reflection. This is why saints are hated, why the purest souls are crucified. It is not their deeds that bring them enemies, but the unbearable transparency of their light. When you are doing nothing wrong, you live closer to your essence. You are not disguising yourself with elaborate masks, and this lack of disguise can be intolerable to those who live bound to their persona. The persona is the mask one wears to meet society's expectations. It is the polished surface, the agreeable facade. Most people cling to it for survival. They cannot imagine showing their raw humanity, for the risk of rejection feels like death itself. When you do not live according to the mask, you awaken a great anxiety in others. You confront them with a terrifying possibility that life could be lived differently, that authenticity is possible, that masks are not necessary. And this revelation provokes both fascination and hatred. Why hatred? Because to confront authenticity means to confront the lie of one's own existence. Imagine a man who has lived decades believing that his worth depends on status, that his identity rests upon approval, that his survival depends on submission to the herd. Then he encounters you, and you are simply being without defense, without corruption. You are a living rebuke to his compromises, a mirror that reflects his cowardice. His unconscious cannot endure such confrontation. And so hatred emerges as the easier path. To destroy the mirror feels easier than to look into it. Thus, people will hate you not for your wrongs, but for your innocence, for your refusal to participate in their self-deception. I recall the story of the scapegoat, ancient and eternal. In the rituals of old, the sins of the community were symbolically placed upon an innocent creature, and the creature was driven into the wilderness, banished, rejected, despised. This was not about the goat's character, for the goat had done nothing wrong. It was about the unbearable burden of guilt and shadow that the community could not hold within itself. So it cast them outward, onto a vessel. Each time you find yourself hated without cause, you are cast in the role of the scapegoat. The shadow of the collective is placed upon you. You carry in their eyes what they cannot carry in their own souls. This is not a personal tragedy, but a profound archetypal pattern. Let us look deeper still. There is within the psyche what I have called the shadow, the sum of all that we repress, deny, and disown. It is not evil in itself, but it becomes evil when ignored. The shadow contains aggression, lust, envy, fear, laziness, but also vitality, imagination, courage, and freedom. When repressed, it festers and projects itself outward. When you meet someone who despises you for no apparent reason, you are seeing the shadow at work. Their unconscious has chosen you as its vessel. You awaken their jealousy because you embody a freedom they deny themselves. You awaken their suspicion because you carry a light that threatens their darkness. You awaken their anger because you embody what they cannot control. Thus, hatred is not about truth. It is about projection. Consider an image, a dream in which you are standing in a village, and suddenly a mob surrounds you, accusing you of theft, though you have stolen nothing. The accusation is irrational, but it binds the mob together. They project upon you the thief that lives within their own souls. They cannot bear to confront it, so they hunt it in you. This is not merely dream imagery. This is history. This is the witch trials, the inquisitions, the lynchings, the persecutions. Always the innocent, the eccentric, the healer, the visionary are accused of crimes they never committed. Why? Because they dare to exist outside the herd's illusion. Because their very existence provoked the hidden shadow of the collective. When you walk in truth, you carry the weight of solitude. To walk authentically means to walk apart from the crowd. And the crowd resents this. The crowd wishes to pull you back into its unconscious dance, to bind you with its rituals of conformity. To stand outside it is to reveal its emptiness, and emptiness is intolerable to the unconscious mind. So the crowd hates, but remember, hatred is a confession. It is the confession of a soul that cannot endure the mirror of authenticity. It is the cry of the wounded psyche that would rather destroy than awaken. To receive hatred when you have done nothing wrong is not a curse but a sign. It means you have become a mirror, and mirrors are feared. You must learn then to endure this hatred without collapsing into bitterness, for the danger is great. If you internalize the projections of others, you begin to believe you are indeed guilty. This is the wound of the scapegoat, to carry the shadow of the tribe until you no longer distinguish it from your own soul. Many sensitive souls are destroyed in this way. They believe the hatred must reflect some secret flaw within themselves. They mistake projection for revelation. Do not make this error. Hatred without cause is never about you. It is about the shadow. To endure it, you must anchor yourself in self-knowledge. You must know your shadow so well that the projections of others cannot confuse you. When you have befriended your own darkness, the darkness of others cannot seduce you into guilt. But there is another mystery. Hatred often comes not only when you do nothing wrong, but precisely when you shine with goodness. Have you noticed how joy provokes envy? How generosity awakens suspicion? How beauty arouses resentment? The psyche, trapped in its wounded state, cannot tolerate the reminder of what it has lost. When you shine, you awaken in others the memory of their own lost radiance. They remember unconsciously that once they too were whole, luminous, unafraid, but because they cannot yet reclaim that light, they turn against the one who carries it. In myth, this is why the gods are jealous of mortals who dare to rise too high. Why the brothers of Joseph cast him into the pit. Why Cain slays Abel. The innocent provoke hatred precisely because their light reminds others of their darkness. So I say to you, do not be surprised when you are hated for nothing. It is the most ancient pattern of the psyche. It is written in myth, in ritual, in dream, in history. You are hated because you have become the mirror of unconsciousness. You are hated because your light exposes shadow. You are hated because your innocence unsettles corruption. You are hated because your freedom provokes envy. And yet, this hatred is not a final judgment. It is an initiation. To endure it without collapsing is to step deeper into individuation, to walk the lonely road of authenticity. You cannot please the crowd and remain true to the soul. You must choose, and if you choose truth, hatred will accompany you like a shadow at noon. Let me tell you a dream. A young man once dreamt that he was walking in a marketplace and all the vendors turned their faces toward him, spitting curses. Though he had bought nothing and stolen nothing, he awoke disturbed, unable to understand. But I explained, the dream was not about external enemies, but about the confrontation with the collective unconscious. The marketplace was the world of masks, of personas, of trade and exchange. By walking without mask, he had provoked the wrath of those who lived entirely in disguise. They hated him, not because he wronged them, but because he revealed them. The dream was preparing him for life. To be authentic is to awaken unconscious hatred, and one must learn to walk through it unscathed. Do not, therefore, seek to avoid this hatred. If you try to please everyone, you betray the soul. If you silence your light to avoid envy, you betray the self. The self does not call you to be agreeable, It calls you to be whole, and wholeness provokes the unconscious of the world. This is inevitable, but it is also sacred. For through this confrontation, the unconscious is stirred. Your existence becomes the catalyst for the awakening of others. They may hate you today, but tomorrow, the seed you have planted in their psyche may grow. Hatred is sometimes the first reaction to truth. To resist truth is easier than to accept it, but in time, the seed remains, and hatred may transform into awakening. Thus, even the hatred you endure is not in vain. And so I tell you, the hatred you suffer when you do nothing wrong is not meaningless. It is the voice of the collective shadow. It is the confession of the unconscious. It is the burden of the scapegoat. It is the loneliness of the authentic. It is the cost of individuation, but it is also the path of transformation. To endure hatred without hatred. To suffer projection without collapsing. To hold the mirror without breaking, that is the task of the awakened soul. And though it may crucify you, it will also resurrect you. For beyond hatred lies freedom, and beyond projection lies wholeness. When you ask why the soul attracts hatred, even when it has done nothing wrong, you must look deeper into the archetypal truth. Innocence is intolerable to the corrupted psyche. Every society bears within it a hidden resentment toward purity, because purity reveals the lie upon which the collective dream is built. The herd cannot endure one who stands apart, one who is not seduced by the illusions of conformity. In myth, this is always the story of the one who refuses to bow to idols, who resists the golden calf, who hears a voice deeper than the voice of the crowd. Such a figure is destined for exile, for hatred, for reaction. The tribe calls this rebellion, but it is in fact obedience to the self, that inner image of wholeness that commands you to become what you are. The self is ruthless in this demand. It does not allow compromise, and so when you obey, you are hated not because you are wrong, but because you are true. Hatred without cause often carries a peculiar intensity, as if it were older than the individuals involved. And indeed it is archetypal. The hatred poured upon you is not simply personal. It is the hatred of ages, the inherited fear of every tribe toward the one who awakens. It is the hatred that crucified the Christ, that burned the heretics, that exiled the philosophers. It is not you alone who is despised, but what you represent, the possibility of freedom. The archetype of the liberator always carries with it the archetype of the persecuted. These are twin patterns bound together. To awaken others is to draw down their wrath, for they know not what they do, and yet they must resist. If you stand in authenticity, you must drink this chalice, bitter as it is, but understand this. The hatred of others is also the resistance of their own souls. The psyche resists transformation as the body resists illness, with fever, with trembling, with rejection. Hatred is the fever of the unconscious, a sign that something has been stirred. You, in your innocence, have awakened a disturbance in their psychic order. They do not understand this, and so they call you enemy, but in truth you are their teacher, their midwife, their mirror. The hatred you endure is the labor pain of their own unborn wholeness. If you can see this, you will not despair. You will recognize that even their hostility has meaning, that even their rejection is part of the great alchemical process by which the unconscious becomes conscious. Do not imagine, however, that this path is easy. To endure such hatred is to be wounded. The arrows of suspicion, the whispers of slander, the rejection of those you once trusted. These are real wounds. They penetrate the heart and threaten to poison it. Many succumb, becoming bitter, vengeful, self-righteous. They return hatred for hatred, and thus they fall into the very unconsciousness they once exposed. This is the great danger. The task is not simply to endure hatred, but to transmute it, to remain in love when surrounded by hostility, to remain authentic when the crowd demands disguise, to remain whole when the world fractures you. That is the path of individuation. It is not for the faint of heart. Think of the alchemist who places the base metal into the fire until it burns away its dross and reveals its hidden gold. Hatred is the fire of the world, and you are the metal. If you endure without collapsing, you will discover within yourself the gold of the self, untouchable, radiant, eternal. The hatred of others becomes the very crucible in which you are refined. But this is not a comfortable process. It is agony, for the ego dies in fire. Yet it is necessary, for only through this trial does the ego yield to the greater wholeness of the self. Thus, when you are hated without cause, remember, this too is initiation. Dreams often reveal this drama. I once heard the dream of a woman who saw herself carrying a lantern through a dark forest. As she walked, creatures gathered, snarling, spitting, throwing stones. Though she did not harm them, she asked me what it meant. I told her, the lantern is your consciousness, the light you carry into the dark. The forest is the collective unconscious, full of shadows, full of fears. The creatures are not strangers, but parts of humanity's psyche. Terrified of light, they hate you because you carry the lantern, yet the dream does not tell you to extinguish it. It tells you to walk on, to endure, to let the hatred be what it is, while you continue to carry the light. In this way, the dream is a preparation for life. The brighter your consciousness, the more the shadows will rage. But the lantern is not for them alone, it is for you. And for those who will one day follow, do not forget that hatred often conceals unconscious admiration. The one who despises you is often the one who secretly longs to be like you. But because this longing threatens their ego, they cannot admit it. So it twists into envy, and envy into hostility. If you look carefully, you will see that behind hatred often lies a wounded love. The soul recognizes in you something it has lost, and it both desires and resents it. This is why hatred is often obsessive. Why the hater cannot look away. They circle you, watching, condemning, yet unable to release you from their attention. They are bound to you because you embody what their soul desires, even if their conscious mind denies it. And so Paradoxically, hatred reveals intimacy. The one who hates you knows you in a way even friends may not. They have projected into you a part of their own soul. And in this projection, they are bound. If you see this, you may begin to carry their hatred differently. Instead of receiving it as poison, you may hold it as a symbol. It tells you what they have lost, what they fear, what they deny. It is not about you, though it wounds you. It is about their own unfinished journey. If you can bear this without arrogance, you become a kind of healer, though perhaps they will never thank you. For the healer is often despised before he is recognized. The medicine tastes bitter before it heals. The presence of authenticity tastes bitter to the unconscious, but in time it may awaken. This is why I say, even the hatred you receive has meaning. Do not waste it in resentment. Let it teach you. The archetype of the martyr speaks here. The martyr does not seek death, but he accepts that the truth he embodies provokes it. He does not collapse under hatred, nor does he retaliate. He bears it as part of the destiny of the self. The martyr archetype is not about victimhood, but about fidelity to truth in the face of rejection. When you are hated without cause, you are invited into this archetype. You are asked, will you betray your soul to please the crowd? Or will you bear the cross of rejection to remain whole? This is the choice. Each soul must make it, and in making it, the soul becomes what it is meant to be. Individuation always passes through the fire of hatred. There is no other way. Consider again the paradox. The more you become yourself, the more others resist you. This is the cost of authenticity, but also consider this. The more you endure, the more you awaken. Hatred can refine your vision. It strips away illusions of belonging. It forces you to find strength in the self rather than in the approval of the tribe. It teaches you solitude, and solitude is the school of the soul. When you can stand alone, when you can endure rejection without losing yourself, then you are free. No hatred can destroy you, for you no longer depend on the crowd. This is the gift hidden in the wound. Hatred drives you inward, where you discover the wellspring of the self, and from that wellspring you draw a strength the world cannot give and cannot take away. Let me speak now of symbols. The cross is the greatest of these. An innocent one, condemned, lifted up, hated by the multitude. And yet, through that hatred, a new wholeness emerges. The cross is the archetype of transformation through suffering. When you are hated without cause, you are upon your own cross. You are stretched between opposites, innocence and condemnation, authenticity and rejection, light and darkness. This tension tears you, but it also enlarges you. The ego cannot endure it, but the self is born from it. Thus, the cross is not only agony, but also initiation. Hatred, too, is a cross. And if you endure it without hatred, in return, you discover resurrection. You rise beyond the judgment of the crowd. You become whole. So, my friends, when you are hated, though, you have done nothing wrong. Do not despair. You are participating in an eternal drama. You are living out the archetype of the scapegoat, the martyr, the wounded healer. You are carrying the projections of the unconscious so that perhaps some may awaken. This is no small task. It is the burden of the authentic, but it is also the gateway to the self. For beyond hatred lies freedom, and beyond rejection lies wholeness. Remember, the soul that is most true is also most despised, and yet it is precisely this soul that transforms the world. It is important to recognize that hatred without cause is a psychic law, as natural as the law of gravity, though invisible to the untrained eye. When light shines into darkness, the shadows do not simply vanish, they rage. They resist. They twist into new shapes. In you, the light of authenticity stirs the unconscious of those around you, and they experience this stirring as a threat. They do not know why they feel uneasy in your presence. They cannot articulate it, and so the mind seizes upon convenient rationalizations. They dislike your tone, your expression, your choices, your very being. But beneath these rationalizations lies the true source. You have disturbed the archetypal slumber of their soul. You have awakened in them the presence of the shadow. And the first response to awakening is often hostility. This is why you may walk into a room, speak no word of accusation, and yet feel the temperature shift against you. You carry within you a vibration that unsettles the carefully constructed equilibrium of others. Do not be deceived. What they hate is not you, but the call of the self that your presence whispers into their ears. You remind them of the forgotten past. You stir their repressed longings, their silenced courage, their disowned darkness. They would rather live numb than awaken, and so they despise the one who dares to live awake. You may say, "But I only wish to live peacefully." Yet the psyche does not allow such peace for long, for your peace becomes their disturbance. This is the paradox of individuation. In becoming whole, you disturb the half asleep. Consider again the archetypal dramas of mythology. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man, not to harm, but to enlighten. Yet for this, he was hated, chained, punished eternally. Was it his crime? No. It was his gift. The gift awakened fear in those who guarded the old order. Or recall Socrates, who asked only questions, who sought only truth, and for this was condemned to death by his city. His crime was to expose the illusions of the collective. It is always the same. The light bearer is called criminal. The truth teller is condemned as a liar. The healer is denounced as a sorcerer. The hatred is never about the deed, but about the archetypal disturbance. You too walk this path. When you are hated for nothing, you too have stolen fire, though perhaps you do not know it. In dreams, this appears as the figure of the stranger, the outcast, the one who carries a treasure the community cannot accept. A man dreams of holding a golden cup, but everywhere he goes, the villagers spit and curse. Demanding he throw it away, he awakes confused, but the dream reveals the eternal truth. To carry treasure is to attract hostility. The cup is consciousness, and the unconscious resents it. This is no different in waking life. When you carry a treasure of spirit, of insight, of authenticity, the world will often tell you to throw it away. They will call it arrogance, delusion, rebellion. Yet it is not arrogance but necessity. The treasure is not yours alone. It belongs to the self, and the self demands expression. To betray it is to wither. To obey it is to endure hatred. This is the choice. The psyche of the hater reveals itself through projection. Projection is the unconscious mechanism by which one sees in another what one cannot admit in oneself. If a man cannot face his own cowardice, he will despise courage in another, for it reminds him of his lack. If a woman cannot admit her longing for freedom, she will condemn it in another, for it stirs her own repressed hunger. The hated one becomes the vessel of all that is denied. Thus, the hatred aimed at you is a mirror of their soul, and though it wounds, it also teaches. For each hatred you encounter shows you not only their shadow, but also the archetypal law of projection. If you learn to see this, you are no longer enslaved by their judgment. You see through it, you recognize that the hatred is about them, not you. And in that recognition, you become free. But freedom is never won cheaply. The ego longs for belonging, for approval, for love. To be hated is to be exiled, and exile feels like death. The child within you cries out, "What have I done? Why do they not love me?" And the temptation is great to betray your authenticity in order to regain approval. But to do so is to remain enslaved to the collective. The path of individuation requires that you bear the exile. You must be willing to walk alone, to endure misunderstanding, to carry the wound of rejection. Only then can you discover that beyond the crowd there is a deeper belonging, a belonging to the self, to the eternal pattern, to the archetypal truth that transcends approval. This is the secret strength of the authentic. Though hated by the many, they are rooted in the one. The hatred of others thus becomes the furnace of transformation. Each rejection forces you to turn inward, to find within yourself the source of worth. Each accusation strips away illusion until only essence remains, and in that essence you discover the eternal. The self is not touched by hatred. It does not collapse under accusation. It does not depend on approval. It is whole in itself. To discover this is to be liberated. But liberation comes only through fire. Hatred is that fire. And so, paradoxically, those who despise you become your initiators. They drive you into the depths of your own soul, where you find the treasure no one can take. This is why the mystics have always spoken of enemies as hidden teachers. They wound us, and through the wound we awaken. They reject us, and through exile we find our true home. They accuse us, and through injustice we discover the self beyond all accusation. It is not easy, but it is true. The soul grows not in comfort, but in confrontation. Hatred without cause is a confrontation with the archetypal shadow of the collective. It strips you of illusions and forces you into authenticity. If you can bear it, you will grow into wholeness. But beware, to endure hatred without cause requires vigilance against your own shadow. For when you are hated unjustly, the temptation is strong to despise in return, to project your own darkness outward, to become what you condemn. Then you fall into the same unconsciousness as those who hate you. You must resist this. You must hold your shadow consciously. Acknowledge your anger, your hurt, your desire for revenge. But do not be possessed by them. Integrate them and let them become strength. The hatred of others awakens your own shadow. This too is part of the initiation. To endure hatred is to meet your own darkness as well as theirs. If you can integrate both, you move toward wholeness. I once knew a man who dreamed that he was chained in a dungeon, surrounded by jeering faces, all condemning him, though he knew he was innocent. At first he despaired, but then he saw that the faces were masks, and behind each mask was his own reflection. The dream revealed that the hatred of others was inseparable from his own unintegrated shadow. He was both the innocent prisoner and the condemning mob. To endure hatred without collapsing, he had to recognize that even his enemies mirrored him. The dream taught him compassion, for he saw that their hatred was his own denied part. This is the deepest truth. The outer hatred you face is inseparable from the inner shadow you carry. To endure it is to integrate both. And so, my friends, when you are hated, though you have done nothing wrong, see it as a summons. You are being called into deeper self-knowledge. You are being asked to carry the archetypal role of the scapegoat, the truth teller, the light bearer. You are being initiated into solitude, into authenticity, into wholeness. It is not easy, it is not glamorous, but it is necessary, for only those who endure the hatred of the unconscious can truly awaken, and in awakening they become beacons for others, whether the others know it or not. Even hatred serves the self. Even rejection furthers individuation, for in the great alchemy of the psyche, nothing is wasted, not even hatred without cause. There is a profound solitude in realizing that people will hate you not for your sins but for your truth. And yet, this solitude is also liberation. For once you understand the law of projection, you cease to be enslaved by the opinions of others. You see that what is hurled at you is rarely about you. It is the psychic material of those who have not yet faced themselves. To live with this knowledge is to live differently. You no longer crave universal approval because you recognize its impossibility. You no longer tremble before the crowd because you see their judgments as shadows cast upon a wall. You become rooted in something deeper, the self, that eternal image of wholeness that is within you and beyond you at once. And the self does not rise or fall according to the hatred of men. Hatred without cause is, in its essence, a revelation of the archetypal drama of light and darkness. Every soul carries both, but few allow themselves to see it. Most cling to the mask of goodness while repressing the shadow. When such a soul encounters one who lives without disguise, the mask is threatened and the shadow stirs. This stirring feels like danger, and the conscious mind interprets it as hostility toward you, but in truth, it is hostility toward their own disowned darkness. The tragedy is that instead of integrating the shadow, they project it, and thus the cycle of hatred continues through centuries, through generations, through every community. It is as old as Cain and Abel, as ancient as the myths of sacrifice, as ever present as the scapegoat ritual. Each age repeats it, because each age forgets. The one who dares to remember is always cast out, and yet, if you can bear it, you will find that this very rejection is a doorway, for in exile you discover who you truly are. You no longer define yourself by the voices of the tribe, but by the whisper of the self. This is why prophets go into the wilderness, why mystics retreat to caves, why visionaries are driven into solitude. It is not simply to escape persecution, but to listen. In solitude, the noise of projection falls silent, and the deeper voice is heard. That voice is not the voice of approval or condemnation. It is the voice of wholeness, summoning you to become what you are. Hatred drives you into solitude, and solitude drives you into self. Thus, the very thing that wounds you becomes the instrument of your awakening. Dreams often prepare us for this path. A woman once dreamed that she was walking across a bridge, and below her surged a river of black water filled with faces, all screaming her name in anger. At first she trembled, thinking the faces were enemies. But as she looked closer, she saw that each face was her own. Distorted by fear, the dream revealed that the hatred she feared was inseparable from her own unconscious. The bridge was her individuation, the crossing from collective illusion into personal authenticity. The screaming faces were the projections she had to endure. To cross the bridge, she could not silence them. She had to walk on in spite of them. And this is the truth for each of us. The bridge is before you, the river below. The faces will scream, but the crossing is necessary. What then shall you do when you are hated without cause? First, do not be surprised. Expect it, for it is inevitable. Second, do not internalize it. Do not allow the projections of others to define your soul. Their hatred is about them, not you. Third, use it. Let it drive you inward. Let it teach you solitude. Let it refine your authenticity. Hatred is not the end of your path, but the beginning. It is the fire that burns away illusion. If you can endure it without becoming bitter, you will grow into freedom. And freedom is the rarest of all treasures. Do not mistake me. I do not glorify suffering. Hatred wounds, and the wound is real. But the psyche is alchemical. It transforms poison into medicine, shadow into light, hatred into wholeness. If you endure it consciously, if you resist, if you collapse into despair or retaliation, you are consumed. But if you hold attention, if you remain faithful to yourself, then the hatred becomes fuel. It strengthens you, it teaches you, it enlarges you. This is why the mystics say, love your enemies, not because their actions are just, but because their hatred is the very material by which your soul is refined. To love your enemies is to recognize that even their hostility serves your wholeness. It is to transform the wound into wisdom. There is an image that has haunted me, the alchemical vessel, sealed, containing opposites in violent conflict. Fire rages within it, pressure builds, and it seems the vessel will shatter. But if it holds, transformation occurs, gold emerges from base matter. The soul is like this vessel. When you are hated without cause, you are sealed within a conflict of opposites, innocence and accusation, authenticity and rejection, light and darkness. It is unbearable. And yet if you hold it, if you do not shatter, something is born. This something is not the ego, but the self. It is a new wholeness, indestructible, radiant. Hatred becomes the fire of transformation. Do not flee it. Hold it. Let it do its work. At last, let us return to the mystery with which we began. Why people hate you most when you are doing nothing wrong? It is because innocence reveals guilt, authenticity exposes masks, freedom threatens chains. You are hated not because you have wronged them, but because you remind them of what they fear within themselves. You awaken their shadow, you disturb their sleep, and they call this disturbance evil, but it is not evil. It is the first stirring of awakening. Hatred is often the first cry of a soul confronted with truth. In time, if they are brave, the hatred may turn to curiosity, and curiosity to longing, and longing to transformation. You may never see it. You may be hated, but the seed will remain, and the seed is enough. So take courage. If you are hated, though you have done nothing wrong, you are not cursed, you are chosen. You have been drawn into the eternal drama of light and shadow, scapegoat and crowd, exile and self. Do not betray your soul to win their love. Do not extinguish your light to appease their darkness. Walk on, carry your lantern, endure the screaming faces. Bear the cross, for on the other side of hatred is freedom, and on the other side of exile is wholeness. And one day, perhaps, the very ones who despised you will see that your presence was their mirror, and that your rejection was their invitation. But whether they see it or not, you will have fulfilled your destiny. You will have become whole. And so, my friends, I leave you with this. Hatred without cause is the shadow's testimony to your authenticity. It is not a verdict against you, but a sign of your truth. Do not fear it. Do not flee it. Do not retaliate against it. Endure it, and let it shape you. For in the alchemy of the soul, even hatred is gold. Even rejection is grace. Even exile is a path. You are hated because you are true. And there is no greater calling than this, to be true to the self, though the world despise you. For in the end, the world passes, but the self remains. And the self is eternity within you.